The day the starship fell from the sky, nobody understood what it was. At first, people thought it was an asteroid, a flaming rock tearing across the night, splitting the heavens with its fire. I was 17 then, standing barefoot on a field outside my father's ruined farmhouse, watching the streak of light burn like the wrath of God. When it hit the earth, the ground shook for miles. Windows shattered, and old barns collapsed as if the soil itself had grown tired of holding them. We didn't know it then, but that was the night humanity's curse and salvation landed in the dirt. I grew up in a world that was already broken. The invasion had come 10 years before, and with it came slavery, humiliation, and chains on every man, woman, and child. The aliens didn't want peace. They wanted dominance. They looked at us the way farmers look at cattle, useful only for labor, never worth respect. My father used to spit whenever one of their patrol crafts flew overhead. He hated them more than anything, but he never dared raise a hand. He was already beaten too many times for defiance. But me? I carried his anger in my chest like a fire. Every time they marched through the streets, every time they dragged someone away for resisting, I swore one day I'd make them regret ever landing on Earth. I just didn't know how. The fallen ship gave me my answer. It was massive. Half buried in a crater, scarred and burning, its black hull cracked like a dead beast's bones. For weeks, the aliens didn't come back for it. Maybe they considered it useless, too damaged to repair. Maybe they were too arrogant to care if humans scavenged scraps. Either way, they left it, and humans, desperate and broken, gathered around it like moths to flame. I was one of them. The first time I touched its cold, scorched metal, I felt small and useless, like a rat crawling across a god's corpse. But when I crawled inside through a torn hatch, something changed. The ship wasn't dead. It breathed. It hummed with a strange pulse, faint but alive, like a wounded animal refusing to die. The others saw it as junk, something to strip for parts. But I saw it as something else. I saw it as a weapon. I wasn't the only one. In the months that followed, men like me, angry, broken, desperate, kept coming back. We weren't scientists, not soldiers, just survivors with calloused hands and hatred in our blood. We brought whatever tools we had left. Rusted wrenches, old welding torches, scrap metal stolen from the aliens themselves. We worked in secret, always watching the skies, always listening for their patrols. Every night, I'd crawl inside that ruined ship and teach myself its language. Its systems were dead, but they whispered faintly in glowing runes and broken holograms. I didn't understand them at first, but I had time. And more than that, I had obsession. While others scavenged for food, I scavenged for meaning in those alien circuits. I burned my hands more than once, electrocuted myself twice, and nearly suffocated when a vent collapsed. But every mistake taught me something. The ship began to speak to me in ways I could understand. It wasn't just a machine, it was a promise. The years bled together, and the project grew. Hidden barns became workshops. Abandoned factories became forges. Families gave up their sons to help us, whispering prayers that maybe, just maybe, we were building a way out of slavery. I watched boys become men in the ship's shadow, their eyes carrying the same fury as mine. The aliens had forgotten their broken warship, but we hadn't. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, we rebuilt it, not with their precision, but with our desperation. We welded Earth's steel onto alien frames. We carved their dead technology into something we could wield. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, but it was ours. And deep inside its core, when the first lights blinked alive after years of silence, I realized what we were creating. Not just a ship, not just a weapon. We were building revenge. The first time the ship's lights flickered back to life, I felt something inside me wake up too. It was just a faint pulse running along the panels, a weak hum crawling out from the buried heart of the machine. But to me, it was like hearing thunder for the first time after years of silence. Proof. Proof that all our suffering wasn't for nothing. Proof that the bastards in the sky weren't untouchable. The others cheered when it happened. Men who hadn't smiled in years let out roars that shook the crater walls. But then they looked at me, waiting. Somehow, without ever asking for it, I had become the one they followed. Not because I was the smartest, I wasn't. Not because I was the strongest. I was barely 20 by then, thin from hunger and overwork. But I was the one who never stopped. When others grew tired, I kept welding. When sparks burned through my shirt, I ignored the pain. When a panel overloaded and blasted me back into the dirt, I dragged myself up and went right back inside. Obsession had made me their leader. We worked in shifts, sleeping in the dirt, eating whatever scraps could be stolen or grown in secret. We didn't speak much, not unless it was about the ship. Words were dangerous in a world crawling with alien patrols. But in the silence of our work, there was understanding. Every cut, every weld, every wire stripped and replaced, it was our rebellion carved in metal. The ship began to look less like wreckage and more like a beast waking from its coma. Its hull, once cracked open, was patched with mismatched steel and alien alloys. Earth's crude handiwork mixed with their precision. Ugly to look at, but strong. We couldn't restore it to what it had been, but we didn't want to. We were making something new. Of course, it wasn't just us. Whispers had begun spreading across the villages and ruins where humanity still clung to life. Stories of the fallen god of fire, of the weapon of men. Old women whispered about it like it was a prophecy, and children were told to keep their mouths shut when patrols came through. Every week, more hands joined us. Engineers who had once built skyscrapers, mechanics who once fixed trucks, farmers who knew nothing but how to lift, hammer, and hold steady. Every man carried hate in his chest. And every man wanted a piece of vengeance. But vengeance had a cost. The aliens weren't blind. Their patrols grew more frequent. Drones circled the skies. Villages near the crater began to vanish. People dragged off in chains. Burned homes left as warnings. They didn't know exactly what we were building, but they knew something was stirring. One night, as I lay inside the half-gutted engine chamber, I heard the low, distant hum of their crafts. The others scrambled, shoving tarps over the glowing panels, kicking tools into the dirt. We had dug tunnels around the crater for moments like this, and men slid into them like rats hiding from hawks. I stayed where I was, pressed against the cold alien metal, listening. The patrol ship drifted overhead, its floodlights stabbing through the night. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay still. If they saw even a spark of light, if they suspected what lay buried here, they would rain fire down and erase us. All our years of work would vanish in seconds. The ship passed. The hum faded. The floodlights blinked out into the distance. Only then did I realize I had been holding my breath so long my chest ached. It was getting dangerous. Too dangerous. But we kept going. Because we had to. The first breakthrough came when we cracked open what I thought was a dead engine core. It wasn't dead. It was asleep. With scavenged power cells and a patchwork of human wiring, we fed it enough energy to wake. I'll never forget the sound, a roar like metal grinding against the bones of the earth, so deep it rattled our teeth. The ground shook, as if the ship remembered what it once was. For hours it screamed, light pouring from its vents, until finally it settled into a low, steady thrum. That was the night I realized we had crossed a line we couldn't come back from. The aliens must have felt it. Maybe they had sensors. Maybe they simply knew their lost beast had stirred. Within days, their patrols doubled. Villages miles away were burned. People whispered in fear that we had doomed them all. I didn't blame them. Maybe we had. But the truth was simple. If we didn't fight, we were already doomed. Months bled into years. By then, I was no longer a boy. The mirror, when I caught glimpses of myself in shards of broken glass, showed a man with sharp features, sunken eyes, and hands calloused like stone. My hair was always singed at the ends from sparks, my arms burned with scars, my voice hoarse from shouting over grinding machinery, and the ship, it was no longer their ship. It was ours. The bridge came alive first. We had patched together enough controls, rewired enough alien tech, that I could stand there and feel like a captain on the edge of war. Screens flickered with symbols we couldn't read, but we had taught ourselves what mattered. Red meant failure. Green meant life. When the first panel flashed green under my hands, I felt like I was holding Earth's heartbeat. Weapons came next. Not all of them. We didn't understand half the systems, but we salvaged enough. Cannons that had once cut through starships now sat mounted and patched with Earth's iron. They didn't fire clean bolts of energy anymore. They roared, spitting unstable light that burned the dirt black, but they fired. And that was enough. The men tested them in secret at night, aiming at abandoned hills, laughing like madmen when explosions ripped the silence apart. We knew we were signing our death warrants by being so loud, but we couldn't help it. For once, the fear was theirs. Still, the aliens had not yet come in force. Maybe they still thought of us as nothing. Maybe they believed the crippled ship could never rise again. Their arrogance was our only shield, and we worked beneath it like wolves sharpening our teeth in the dark. But the day came when we could hide no longer. It was early morning, the sun still dragging itself over the horizon, when we heard the thunder of their engines. Not one patrol, not two, an entire fleet. Their ships blackened the sky, their shadows swallowing the crater. The men froze, tools dropping from their hands. Some whispered prayers, others cursed. For years we had prepared, but no one was truly ready for this. I climbed up the scarred ramp into the bridge, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the cracked glass of the viewport, I saw their fleet circling like vultures. This was it. Either our years of work were about to pay off, or everything was about to end. The ship hummed beneath my hands. Alive, angry, waiting. I gripped the controls, my scarred fingers trembling. The men gathered behind me, silent, every eye fixed on me. They didn't need to say it. I was the one to decide. "Power her up," I growled, my voice low, steady, almost foreign to my own ears. Engines that had slept for decades roared awake. The ground trembled, dust raining from the crater walls. Lights blazed across the patched hull. Alarms wailed, panels screamed warnings in alien tongues, but none of it mattered. The beast was awake. The aliens must have realized then that their arrogance had betrayed them. Their ships shifted, weapons charging, ready to annihilate us. But we were ready too. The cannons spun, their cores glowing with unstable fire. The bridge shook with power. For the first time since the invasion, humanity was not bowing. We were standing. The first shot tore through the sky like a vengeful sun. It slammed into the lead alien cruiser, ripping its hull apart in a blast of molten metal. For a heartbeat, silence followed. Then the crater erupted with cheers, roars, screams of rage and joy. We had done it. We had drawn blood. And I knew, in that moment, there was no turning back. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was revenge. The blast that tore through the alien cruiser was more than just a strike. It was a scream, a scream of rage bottled up for decades, unleashed in a blinding surge of fire. The ship didn't just explode, it split apart in the sky, burning wreckage scattering like dying stars over the horizon. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. I remember gripping the controls so tightly my knuckles went white, sweat burning in my eyes. The bridge around me shook with the aftershock. Men behind me stared, mouths open as though they couldn't believe what they had just seen. For years we had dreamed of this moment, but dreams are one thing. Reality is something else. We had killed one of them, one of the invincible gods that had enslaved us, and just like that, their immortality shattered. But victory is never clean. The alien fleet didn't hesitate after the first blast. They were shocked, yes. Arrogant creatures always are when the cattle bite back. But they recovered fast. Their ships broke formation, dark wings spreading across the sky. Beams of searing light rained down, carving molten scars into the earth around our crater. Explosions threw men off their feet. The air reeked of ozone and burning soil. "Return fire!" I roared, my voice cracking with fury. The cannons howled, each shot shaking the bones of the ship. They weren't perfect. Sometimes they sputtered, sometimes they fired wild, tearing into the wrong patch of sky. But when they hit hard. Another alien craft burst apart, spiraling into the ground in a storm of fire. The men shouted like mad dogs, their voices raw with rage and triumph. Some beat their fists against the walls, others cried openly, tears cutting through dirt-streaked faces. For the first time in their lives, they weren't victims. They were warriors. But the aliens weren't fools. They adapted. Their ships spread out, circling us like wolves around a wounded bull. Their beams became sharper, more precise. One seared across the hull, ripping through the patched steel we had welded over old wounds. Alarms screamed, sparks showering the bridge. "She can't take this much longer," one of the mechanics shouted, his face pale, his hands shaking over a panel. "She'll hold," I growled, though I wasn't sure if I was telling him or myself. The truth was brutal. The ship wasn't ready for war. She was a broken beast, forced back to life with Earth's crude hands. She could fight, yes, but she couldn't withstand a fleet. Every strike tore at her, every blast cracked her armor further, but she didn't need to last forever. She only needed to prove one thing, that humans weren't beaten. "Target their engines," I ordered. "Cripple them, make them bleed." The cannons obeyed, spitting fire into the sky. Another cruiser shuddered as its engine flared out, spiraling into the ground with a deafening crash. The crater shook, dust filling the air. The men roared louder, their voices nearly drowning out the alarms. Still, I could see it, the tide turning against us. For every ship we brought down, 5 more circled, raining death. The ground outside the crater was a wasteland of fire and smoke. Villages miles away were burning, collateral to a battle they hadn't chosen. My chest ached with fury. This was the cost of rebellion. Innocent lives turned to ash because we had dared to fight. The thought nearly broke me. But then I saw their ships circling lower. Cautious now, no longer untouchable, no longer gods. And I knew it was worth it. The engines beneath me roared, shaking the ground. The beast was awake, and she wanted more. "Lift her," I whispered, then louder, "Take her up." Men scrambled, working controls, rerouting power, feeding everything we had into the thrusters. The ship screamed like it was tearing itself apart, but slowly, so slowly, the crater began to fall away beneath us. Dust swirled, debris clattered, and the men clung to railings as the ground shrank. For the first time, we were rising. The aliens must have panicked. They dove at us, beams lashing, missiles streaking, but we were airborne now, no longer trapped in their cage of dirt. I pulled hard on the controls, the patched systems groaning but obeying. The ship lurched, rolling like a wounded hawk, but we cleared the crater walls and clawed into the open sky. The Earth looked small beneath us, scarred and burning. The alien fleet loomed above, black silhouettes against the dawn. I felt my blood boil. This was it. This was where we either proved humanity's worth or died trying. "Fire everything we've got," I snarled. The cannons unleashed hell. The sky lit up with fire and fury. Alien ships burst apart one by one, their sleek perfection no match for our rage-fueled monster. We weren't efficient. We weren't clean. But every shot carried generations of anger, and that was something no alien could prepare for. Still, they hit back harder. A beam tore through the side of the ship, ripping an entire section of the hull apart. Men screamed as fire consumed them, the bridge shaking so violently I thought we'd split in two. Alarms wailed, lights died, smoke filled the air. "She's breaking!" someone shouted. "No!" I growled, forcing myself forward, hands locked on the controls. "She's fighting." The ship trembled, but she held. I swear I felt it, her rage matching ours. She wasn't just metal and circuits anymore. She was human now, forged in our desperation, our fury, our scars. And together we struck again. A barrage of unstable fire slammed into the largest alien vessel, a towering cruiser that had been directing the fleet. Its shields flared, cracking under the assault. I poured everything into the attack, every last scrap of power, until the panels on the bridge glowed red-hot and the air reeked of burning wires. The cruiser split apart, exploding in a cascade of light that painted the dawn blood red. For a heartbeat, silence followed. The fleet faltered. Their formation broke. Ships scattered, retreating, vanishing into the upper atmosphere. We had won. Not a clean victory, not without cost, but a victory all the same. The men roared, their voices echoing through the ruined ship. Some fell to their knees, sobbing. Others clutched each other, laughing like lunatics. I sat in the captain's chair, my chest heaving, my hands shaking, staring out at the burning wreckage drifting through the sky. We had done it. We had drawn blood. We had made them fear us. But as the ship groaned around me, fires still burning in her wounds, I knew this was only the beginning. They wouldn't forgive us for this. They wouldn't forget. The aliens would return, stronger, angrier, determined to crush us completely. But so would we. Because for the first time in history, we weren't fighting to survive. We were fighting to win, and revenge had only just begun. The ship hung in the sky like a wounded predator, smoke trailing from her hull, fires still burning in her belly. The dawn stretched wide beneath us, painting the world in colors that didn't belong to peace: red, black, and ash. From the bridge window, I could see the wreckage of alien ships burning across the horizon. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like triumph. But all I felt was rage. Because even as we had struck them down, their retaliation had left the ground below scorched. Villages turned to ash. Fields of crops burned into blackened stumps. Men, women, and children who had nothing to do with our rebellion lay buried under rubble and flame. We had proved humanity's strength, but at a cost that gnawed at me like acid. The men around me didn't see it that way. They cheered, still drunk on the glory of battle. Their voices filled the bridge, echoing with laughter, shouts, and the raw sound of men who had spent their entire lives bowing, finally standing tall. Some beat their fists against the walls of the ship, others gripped their comrades, tears streaming down their faces. For them, the pain below was drowned by the fire above. For me, it was different. I had seen the price. And I knew this was only the start. The aliens would return, not in patrols, not in scattered fleets. They would come in force, and when they did, Earth would suffer more than it ever had. They wouldn't stop until every human settlement was ash, until every man who dared raise his head was broken. Unless we took the fight to them first. That thought consumed me as we limped the ship back down, lowering her into a valley far from the crater where we had been born. The old resting place was too exposed now. Too many eyes had seen what we had done. Too many aliens had tasted defeat there. If we stayed, we would be buried. So we hid. The valley was deep and scarred, surrounded by cliffs that shielded it from the skies. We patched the ship with scavenged steel, tearing apart alien wreckage that had fallen nearby. Fires still burned in her ribs, and it took days just to stop the smoke from choking us. But she lived. That was all that mattered. I barely slept. Every night I walked the bridge, staring out at the stars, my hands pressed against the controls. I could feel her heart beating beneath me, the thrum of engines too stubborn to die. She was scarred. Patched. Wounded, but so was I. So were all of us. And she wasn't just a ship anymore. She was a promise. The men began to whisper names for her. Some called her the Beast, others the Wraith. A few just called her home. But for me, she was simply ours. And with her, we would strike back. The first raids were small, quick strikes against alien patrol stations. We would descend out of the night like a ghost, cannons roaring, fire raining down, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. It wasn't clean, it wasn't efficient, but it was brutal, and it worked. For the first time in years, humans weren't hiding. We were hunting. Every victory sparked rebellion across the world. Villages once too afraid to whisper began to arm themselves. Men took up old rifles, knives, even sharpened sticks, emboldened by the sight of alien wreckage burning. They called us legends, whispered stories of the fallen star reborn by human hands. They said we were proof that the aliens could bleed. But with legend comes weight. Every time we struck, the aliens struck harder. Whole towns were wiped out in retaliation. People I had never met died screaming because of the fire we had lit. And though my men roared louder with every victory, though they drowned their grief in bloodlust, I felt the burden heavier each night. One evening, after a raid on a slave convoy, I found myself standing alone in the hangar, staring at the bodies we had rescued. Dozens of them, starved and broken, huddled together in the dirt. Some wept, others simply stared blankly, too hollow to feel anything. One of them, an old man, looked at me with sunken eyes. "You're the one," he rasped, "the one who woke the beast." I didn't answer. "They'll kill us all for this," he whispered. "They'll burn the world because of you." I turned and walked away. I didn't have the strength to tell him he was right. The weeks bled together. The raids grew larger, bolder. We struck factories where aliens built their machines. We attacked prisons where they kept our people in chains. We even stormed one of their command outposts, slaughtering them in their own stronghold. Every battle carved new scars into the ship. Every victory cost lives. But every time we came back, men still alive cheered like it was the last day of the world. And slowly I began to notice something. Fear. Not from us, from them. Their patrols grew hesitant. Their convoys doubled their guards. Their fleets flew lower, cautious, wary of the sky that no longer belonged only to them. We had forced fear into their veins, and fear makes even gods stumble. But fear also brings wrath. It came one night without warning. We had just returned from a raid on a fuel depot, the ship's cannons still glowing hot from fire. Men were laughing, drinking stolen bottles, celebrating another wound carved into the invaders. I sat on the bridge, staring out at the stars, too restless to join them. That's when I saw it. Not one ship, not a fleet, An armada. Dozens, no hundreds of alien warships, blotting out the stars as they descended through the atmosphere. Their lights cut through the night like blades. Their engines roared like thunder. It was not a patrol. It was not a hunt. It was extermination. The alarms screamed, men spilling into the bridge, their faces pale as they saw the sky burning with alien fire. Some froze, others shouted in panic. "They've come for us," one of them cried. "No," I said, my voice low, steady, though my chest felt like it was caving in. "They've come for everyone." And I knew it was true. This wasn't just about the ship anymore. This wasn't about a broken starship rebuilt into vengeance. This was about erasing the infection of rebellion before it spread too far. They weren't here to punish. They were here to end us. The men looked at me, waiting. For orders. For hope. For something to cling to in the face of the sky collapsing. I felt the weight crush down on me. Every choice I had made had led to this moment. Every battle, every strike, every drop of blood spilled. And now, humanity stood at the edge of the abyss. But I refused to break. "We don't run," I said, my voice rising over the alarms, over the panic. "We don't hide. They came here to erase us, but we'll show them what it costs. We'll make them choke on every inch of this world before they take it. We'll burn them, break them, bleed them. They want a war. Then we'll give them one." The men roared in answer, their fear swallowed by fury, their fists slammed against the walls, their voices echoing through the ship. The beast throbbed beneath us, her engines hungry, her cannons glowing. She was wounded, yes, scarred, yes, but she was alive, and so were we. I gripped the controls, staring out at the endless storm of alien ships descending upon us. This was it, the true war. Not for survival. Not for rebellion, for vengeance. And as the first alien beams tore through the night, I swore an oath that burned hotter than fire. If humanity was to fall, we would drag the gods down with us. The night the armada came down, the world caught fire. From the bridge, I watched the sky bleed with their engines, streaks of white and crimson tearing apart the stars as their fleet filled the heavens. Dozens upon dozens of warships, sleek and merciless, their black hulls glowing with power. They didn't arrive quietly. They wanted us to see them. They wanted the world to know that resistance was a crime, punishable by annihilation. And annihilation was exactly what they brought. Their opening barrage was merciless. Cities already struggling to survive were reduced to cinders. Entire forests became oceans of flame. I saw villages I'd passed through in my youth vanish under beams of light that erased everything in an instant. Their fire didn't discriminate. Men, women, children. None of it mattered. They weren't just punishing us for rebellion. They were making an example of humanity. The bridge shook as shockwaves rolled through the valley. Some of the men flinched, others cursed under their breath, their eyes wide as they stared at the sky collapsing. The fear was thick, pressing down on us, daring us to break. But I refused. I looked at my men, scarred, hungry, broken men who had built this beast from scrap, and I saw the same rage burning in their eyes that lived in mine. They were terrified, yes, but under that fear was fury. The kind of fury that comes when everything you love is already ash, when you have nothing left to lose. "They came to burn us out," I growled, my voice carrying over the alarms. But they forgot one thing. The men turned toward me, waiting. "They left us with fire of our own." The beast roared as her engines came alive, shaking the valley. Panels lit up, cannons throbbed with unstable light, and the men gripped their stations, their faces hardening into grim resolve. We weren't running. Not tonight. "Take us up," I ordered. The ship screamed as we rose, dust and debris swirling in a storm around us. The cliffs of the valley fell away, and the sky opened above. Their fleet stretched across the heavens, endless and merciless, a wall of steel and fire. We charged straight into it. The first volley shook the ship to her bones. Beams of light slashed across our hull, tearing away chunks of patched steel, sending showers of sparks through the bridge. Men screamed as flames licked up from broken panels. Alarms blared, filling the air with their shrill warning. But our cannons answered. They roared like thunder, spitting bolts of unstable energy into the dark. One of their frigates exploded, its body splitting apart in a shower of molten fire. Another's engines went dark, sending it spiraling into its own fleet, colliding and tearing another ship apart. The men roared with it, their voices a wall of fury, as if sheer rage could hold the ship together. But rage couldn't stop the truth. We were outnumbered 100-1. Every hit we landed drew blood, yes, but every blow they struck left us closer to death. The hull screamed as beams ripped through it. Fires raged in the corridors. Men fell to the ground, their bodies broken by explosions. Their blood smeared across the bridge floor. I gripped the controls so tightly my fingers bled. My heart pounded like a drum, my breath ragged. Every time a panel exploded, every time a man screamed, I forced myself not to look back. I couldn't. If I faltered, even for a second, we were finished. We fought like demons, clawing our way through the fleet. The beast was slower, heavier, weaker, but she was ours, and she was angry. Every strike she landed was vengeance made fire. And for every ship we destroyed, we proved that humanity's rage was worth more than their arrogance. But they weren't arrogant anymore. Their fleet closed tighter, surrounding us in a cage of fire. Beams crisscrossed the sky, tearing at us from all sides. Our patched hull buckled, alarms screamed louder, and I knew we couldn't last. Not like this. "Break formation," I snarled, more to myself than to them. My eyes darted over the panels, looking for weakness, for anything. And then I saw it, their command ship, bigger than the rest, towering above them all like a black mountain of steel, directing the storm. If we could break that, even for a moment, we might survive. "Target their command," I ordered. The men didn't question it. They shifted the cannons, feeding what power we had left into them. The ship trembled, her heart pounding louder, her systems screaming as we forced her past the edge of breaking. The air stank of burning wires, of smoke, of blood. And then we fired. The blast was unstable, wild, tearing through the sky in a bolt of white-hot rage. It slammed into the command ship, ripping across its shields, breaking them apart in a storm of sparks. The cruiser shuddered, fire spewing from its sides, its formation breaking. The men roared, their fists slamming into the walls, their voices echoing like thunder. For a moment, just a moment, the fleet faltered. But the price was brutal. The recoil ripped through us like a hammer, tearing circuits apart, cracking the hull wide open. Fires raged down the corridors, smoke choking the air. Men coughed, screamed, clawed at their stations as flames devoured them. The ship groaned like a dying beast, her systems collapsing. We were breaking. I forced myself to stand, gripping the controls as if my strength alone could hold her together. My vision blurred from smoke and blood dripping into my eyes. My ears rang with alarms and screams. My chest felt like it would cave in. But I refused to fall. "Keep firing!" I roared, my voice raw, torn from my throat. And we did. Shot after shot, unstable and furious, tearing into their fleet, burning holes into their arrogance. We were dying, yes, but we were dragging them down with us. Through the haze, I saw alien ships breaking apart, their perfect black hulls exploding in showers of fire. I saw them scatter, hesitant, fearful, no longer sure of their godhood. And I knew, in that moment, we had already won. Not the battle, no. That would end with our ship in pieces, our bodies burning in the wreckage. But something greater. We had shown them that humanity would not kneel, that even in death we would bite, claw, and burn them until they remembered our fury. The ship shuddered, her engines failing, her cannons flickering out. Panels went dark one by one until only the dim glow of emergency lights remained. Men collapsed around me, some dead, some too broken to rise. The bridge stank of smoke and blood, of fire and oil. I slumped into the captain's chair, my chest heaving, my vision tunneling. Through the cracked viewport, I saw the command ship burning, its fire reflecting in my eyes. We had torn a hole in their perfection, and even if this was the end, that scar would never fade. But deep inside, under the roar of alarms and the scream of metal, I felt it. The beast was not finished. She had more to give. Not survival, no, but vengeance. And vengeance was enough. Silence. That was the first thing I noticed after the storm broke. The beast lay crippled in the sky, drifting among burning wreckage. Smoke poured from her wounds, fires licking at her sides, pieces of her hull breaking away and falling like dead feathers into the blackened earth below. Alarms had gone quiet. Not because the danger was gone, but because the panels that carried them were dead. The men around me were the same. Silent. Some slumped over their stations, their faces frozen in expressions of fury, terror, or grim peace. Others lay sprawled across the bridge floor, blood pooling beneath them, their bodies twisted in the aftermath of explosions. The survivors were barely breathing, coughing smoke, clutching burns, too exhausted to even cry. We were alive, but only just. Through the cracked viewport, I saw the command ship burning in the distance, its colossal body crippled, listing sideways in the sky. Its lights flickered, its formation broken. Pieces of its hull raining fire. Around it the rest of the fleet had pulled back, their arrogance torn apart. We had done the impossible. We had scarred gods. But I couldn't feel triumph, only exhaustion. My hands trembled over the dead controls, my knuckles raw, blood seeping from burns that covered my palms. My chest ached, every breath a struggle, smoke clawing at my lungs. I leaned back in the captain's chair, staring at the ruin we had become. The beast groaned around us, her heart still faintly beating, but weak. She was alive, yes, but barely. Like us, she had given everything. And outside, the world was still burning. The aliens hadn't retreated in defeat. They had pulled back to regroup, to prepare another strike. Already I could see their smaller ships circling like vultures, scanning the ground, herding survivors into chains. They hadn't given up. They never would. We had hurt them. But pain only makes an enemy more dangerous. I forced myself to stand. My legs trembling, my body screaming with pain. The men's eyes followed me, hollow and broken. They waited, as they always did, for orders, for hope, for something to keep them alive a little longer. But for the first time, I had none. "We can't fight another round," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "Not like this." Silence answered me. Not anger, not disappointment, just silence. They knew. One of the mechanics, his arm hanging useless at his side, blood dripping from his brow, finally spoke. "Then what do we do, Captain?" The word felt heavy, heavier than it ever had. Captain. Leader. The man they had chosen to follow into hell. And now, when hell had swallowed us whole, they still looked to me for a way out. I clenched my fists. My father used to tell me something. A man isn't measured by the battles he wins, but by the battles he refuses to run from. We couldn't win, but we sure as hell wouldn't run. "We give them nothing," I said. "Not surrender, not mercy. If they want the beast, they'll have to bleed for every inch of her. If they want us, They'll have to choke on our last breath." The men's eyes lit with fire again, even through their pain. Some coughed out ragged laughs. Others bared their teeth in grim smiles. They were broken, yes, but not beaten. Not yet. We set to work with what little strength we had left. Fires were put out with bare hands, metal plates dragged into place to cover gaping wounds, power rerouted through half-dead circuits. It was desperation, not repair. The beast wouldn't heal, but she would fight again. And that was enough. But as we worked, another wound revealed itself. One not of fire, but of betrayal. I found him in the engine chamber. A man I'd known for years, one of the first to join me when I'd crawled inside the wreck all those years ago. He was crouched over the core, his hands buried in wiring he had no right to touch. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice a growl. He froze, his back stiffening. Slowly, he turned, his face pale, sweat dripping down his brow. His eyes darted to the door, to the shadows, to anything but me. And then I saw it, the device in his hand, small, alien, a transmitter. "You," I whispered, fury boiling in my chest. He swallowed hard. "You don't understand. I understand enough." The others rushed in at the sound of my voice. They saw him, saw the device, and their faces twisted with rage. Shouts filled the chamber, men lunging forward, fists raised, knives drawn. "Traitor!" one of them roared. He tried to speak, but I silenced him with a single blow. My fist cracked across his jaw, sending him sprawling against the engine. The device clattered to the floor, sparking as it broke apart. "Why?" I snarled, grabbing him by the collar, dragging his bloodied face up to mine. "Why betray us?" His eyes, wide with fear, finally met mine. And what I saw there wasn't just fear, it was desperation. "They promised me," he spat, blood on his lips. "They promised if I gave them the ship, they'd spare my family, my children." The men froze. Some lowered their weapons, others cursed under their breath. Family. Children. The words cut deeper than any blade. I wanted to kill him. God, I wanted to break his neck right there and feed his corpse to the fires. But as I stared into his broken face, I saw the truth. He wasn't a coward. He wasn't weak. He was just a man who loved too much. Who had been cornered and crushed until betrayal was the only rope he thought he had left. And that made me hate the aliens even more. They hadn't just conquered us with fire and chains. They had conquered us with love, twisting it into a weapon, turning fathers against their brothers, sons against their captains. I let him go, shoving him to the floor. He sobbed, his hands clutching his face, his voice broken. "Lock him up," I ordered. My voice shook, but I forced it steady. "He lives. Not because he deserves it, but because his children don't deserve to lose a father. We fight for them too." The men obeyed, though their eyes burned with fury. They dragged him away, spitting curses, slamming the door shut behind him. I stood alone in the chamber, staring at the cracked device, sparks dying on the floor. The aliens had already broken us more than I had realized. And still, we fought. The next days blurred into madness. Skirmishes raged in the skies, the armada circling. Striking, testing us. We bled for every battle, but we made them bleed too. The beast roared again and again, cannons firing unstable blasts, engines screaming as we pushed her past the edge of death. We weren't winning, but we weren't losing either. And that was enough to keep hope alive. But I knew something the others didn't. Something I hadn't spoken aloud yet. This couldn't last. The beast was dying. We were dying. And unless we found a way to strike deeper than battles, to wound the aliens in a way they couldn't recover from, humanity would be erased. As I stood on the bridge, staring out at the burning horizon, I made a choice. We would not just fight battles. We would take the war to their very heart, even if it killed us all. The decision was made the night I stood on the bridge and stared at the fractured sky. Smoke still choked the horizon, flames painted the clouds, and alien wreckage burned in the distance. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. For weeks we had fought like cornered wolves, tearing at the Armada, bleeding them with raids and desperate strikes. But the truth was plain to me now. Earth would not survive a war of attrition. Every village burned, every child dragged into chains, every city turned to rubble. It was all proof of what would happen if we stayed on the defensive. We needed to strike deeper, harder, beyond Earth. We needed to make them feel fear in their own strongholds. The men didn't understand at first. When I told them, their faces were pale, their voices low. "Leave Earth?" one asked, his words barely more than a whisper. "We don't even know where they come from." "We don't know if the ship can even hold together that far," another added, staring at the ruined panels, the patched hull groaning with every breath. I listened. I understood. They weren't cowards. They were tired. They had given everything, bled until there was nothing left to bleed. The thought of abandoning Earth, of flying into the belly of the beast, was too much for them to swallow. But then I told them the truth. "If we stay here, we die," I said, my voice like gravel. "Not tomorrow, maybe not even next week, but the Armada will finish this world. They'll scour it clean until there's nothing left but ash. If humanity has a chance, it's not by hiding under the ruins. It's by making them bleed so badly they can't finish the job. By tearing into their heart until they fear us more than they hate us." Silence, and then, slowly, one by one, their eyes hardened. They understood. They always did, once the fear passed. Because men with nothing left will always choose vengeance over waiting to die. It took weeks of preparation. We scavenged everything we could from the wreckage of fallen alien ships. Weapons, engines, armor plating, even scraps of their computers. We grafted them onto the beast, welding their perfection to our desperation, creating something uglier, stronger, hungrier. The ship became less alien, less human, and more monster. She was patched in scars and burns, her insides a maze of wires and steel barely holding together. But she lived. Every groan of her hull, every rumble of her engines, was proof she wanted to fight as much as we did. And fight we would. One night, under a sky still stained by fire, I gathered the men on the bridge. Their faces were hollow, scarred, lit only by the dim glow of the panels. Some leaned on crutches, others bore bandages, all carried wounds that would never heal. But their eyes were alive. "We don't just fight for survival anymore," I told them. "We fight to remind the bastards in the sky that humanity isn't prey. We'll take this beast into their territory, into their strongholds, and we'll burn them from the inside out. They think Earth is weak. We'll show them Earth is a graveyard for their arrogance." The men roared. Not loud, not joyous, but low, steady, full of iron. It was enough. The launch into the stars was madness. The beast screamed as we forced her engines beyond what they were meant to endure, rattling so hard I thought she'd split apart. Men clung to railings, teeth clenched, as the ground fell away and the sky swallowed us whole. The atmosphere tore at us, panels buckling, alarms wailing, flames licking across the hull. But we broke through. Silence, vast and endless, wrapped around us as the black void opened. Stars stretched in every direction, cold and merciless. For a moment, the men were quiet, staring out at the cosmos with wide eyes. For many, it was the first time they had ever seen the universe beyond Earth's sky. And in that silence, I felt something stir in my chest. Not fear, Not rage. Purpose. The beast drifted, her engines humming, her patched systems flickering to life. Alien runes glowed across the panels, half dead, half working. We didn't know exactly where to go, but we didn't need to. The ship knew. She carried their maps, their signals, their whispers buried in her circuits. And I had spent years learning how to hear them. I set the course, my hands steady over the controls. "We follow their signal," I told the men. "It'll lead us to their heart." No one argued. The journey was brutal. The ship groaned with every stretch of distance, her engines coughing, her panels flickering. Men worked day and night, patching leaks, rerouting power, feeding her just enough to keep her alive. Food was scarce, water scarcer. Some died along the way, not to battle, but to hunger, sickness, exhaustion. Their bodies were wrapped in cloth, laid in the airlock, and given to the void. Each time, the men stood in silence, their eyes hard, their jaws clenched. We didn't have graves in space. The stars were their tombstones. But with every death, the survivors grew fiercer. Because each body fed the fire in our chests, each loss made the promise of vengeance heavier, and then, one day, we saw it. Their world. It hung before us like a wound in the void, massive, glowing, ringed with fleets of warships and stations, its surface burning with light, a planet that pulsed with power, a jewel of their empire. Silence filled the bridge as we stared. None of us had imagined it before, not truly. We had hated them, fought them, killed them. But to see their home was different. It made them real, vulnerable. "We're here," I whispered. The men didn't cheer. They didn't roar. They only nodded, their eyes burning with the same fire as mine. Because we all knew what came next. Death. But not just ours. We slipped closer, hiding in the shadow of their debris fields, the beast's engines whispering low. Patrols swarmed the skies, endless fleets drifting like sharks, but they didn't notice us. Not yet. Their arrogance was still our shield. We targeted a station first, a massive outpost guarding the approach to their planet. Its guns bristled, its hull thick, but it wasn't ready for what we carried. The beast's cannons roared, tearing into it with unstable fury. Explosions ripped across its surface, fire spilling into the void. Alarms lit across the fleets as they realized too late what had struck them. We tore the station apart in minutes, ripping its heart out, sending its burning carcass tumbling into orbit. The men cheered then, fists slamming against the walls, their voices raw. Not because we thought we'd survive, but because we had just spat in the face of gods on their own doorstep. But the retaliation came swift. Fleets broke formation, rushing toward us, their weapons glowing with fire. And as the bridge shook, alarms wailing, the beast groaning under the weight of the storm, I felt no fear, only fury. We had brought the war to their heart. Now we would bleed it dry. The sky above their homeworld was war. We had torn their station apart, and in doing so lit a fire they could no longer ignore. Their fleets swarmed like hornets, black ships cutting through the void, weapons blazing, formations tight. Against their numbers, against their strength, we were nothing more than a spark. But sparks start infernos. The beast roared as we dove into them, her patched hull trembling, her cannons vomiting fire. Every shot tore apart a cruiser, ripped holes in their sleek perfection, left burning wreckage drifting in the void. The men screamed with her, their voices raw, their hands bloody on the controls. But every strike we landed came with 10 blows in return. The hull buckled, plating shattered, fires spread through the corridors. Men died in bursts of flame, their screams echoing through the comms. The bridge shook so violently I thought it would split in two. Still, we pressed on, because this wasn't survival anymore. This was vengeance. "Push her forward!" I roared, gripping the controls. "Straight through them!" The beast shuddered as her engines screamed, hurling us into the heart of their fleet. Their fire tore at us from all sides, beams carving scars across her body, but she didn't falter. She lived on hate alone now, the same hate that burned in every man aboard. We crashed into their formation, cannons blazing. One cruiser erupted in flame, its wreckage colliding with another, chain reactions ripping across their lines. For a heartbeat, their formation broke, hesitation rippling through their perfect ranks. And in that heartbeat, I saw it. An opening. The planet loomed ahead, its surface glowing with cities of light, its atmosphere ringed with defenses. Towers of fire reached into the sky, shields glimmered across its orbit, stations bristled with guns. But deep inside, through the haze of signals our stolen systems whispered, I saw their heart. A command nexus. The brain of their war machine. If we struck there, we wouldn't just wound them, we would scar them forever. I locked onto it, my eyes burning. "That's our target," I growled. The men didn't question me. They didn't ask if it was suicide. They knew. Because men with nothing left don't need hope, only purpose. The beast dove, tearing through their fleets, burning wreckage trailing in her wake. Alarms screamed louder, panels burst in showers of sparks, smoke filled the bridge. Men coughed, shouted, clung to life with bleeding hands. Fires spread unchecked, bodies littered the corridors, screams echoed through the comms. Still, we pressed on. We broke through their fleets, slipped past their stations, tore into their defenses. Cannons spat fire until they sputtered, empty. Engines screamed until they shook the ship apart. The beast was dying, but she didn't stop. And then we saw it. The Nexus. It hung above the planet like a crown of steel, massive and glowing. A fortress bristling with weapons, pulsing with power. Their command, their pride, their arrogance made metal. The men fell silent as we stared. Not in fear, not in awe, but in grim understanding. This was it. The end. The alien defenses opened fire the moment we approached. Beams of light slashed through the void, missiles streaked toward us, explosions tore across our hull. The beast screamed as her body cracked, her plating ripped away, her circuits burst. Men died by the dozens, torn apart by flames, crushed by collapsing steel. Their voices filled the comms, shouts of rage, screams of pain, whispers of farewell. I heard them all, every voice carved into my chest like a brand. Still, we pressed on. I gripped the controls with bleeding hands, my vision blurred, my body broken. Every breath was fire in my lungs, but I refused to fall. Not yet. Not before we finished this. "Ram her," I whispered. My voice was raw, shredded. Louder. "Ram her!" The men roared in answer, their voices rising over the alarms, over the fire, over the death around us. They slammed power into the engines, rerouted everything we had left. The beast groaned, her heart pounding one last time. And then she charged. The Nexus filled the viewport, its guns blazing, its shields glowing. Their fire tore at us, ripping chunks of the beast away, but we didn't falter. We dove straight into it, fire trailing behind us. Wreckage falling away. The cannons roared one last time, vomiting unstable fury into the shields. They cracked, splintered, shattered, and then the beast slammed into the Nexus. The impact tore the universe apart. The ship split open, fire consuming her from within. The Nexus erupted in a storm of light, explosions ripping across its body, fire devouring its heart. The planet below shook with the force, flames lighting its skies. For a heartbeat, everything was fire. And then silence. I woke to darkness. Smoke filled my lungs. Blood dripped down my face. Pain racked every inch of my body. The bridge was gone, shattered, torn apart. Bodies floated in the void. Men I had known, fought beside, bled with. Their eyes stared blankly into the endless night. I was alive, but barely. Through the wreckage, I saw the Nexus burning, its pieces scattering across orbit, its heart destroyed. The fleets around it faltered, their formation broken, their comms silent. For the first time, I saw fear in their movements. We had done it. We hadn't survived, but we had won. I don't know how long I drifted, clinging to life in the wreckage. Time lost meaning in the void. But I knew one thing. The story wouldn't die with me. Somewhere survivors would hear. They would see the fire in the sky, hear of the beast that tore into the heart of the gods, know that humanity had not gone quietly. And they would rise, because that was the truth of humanity. We break, we bleed, we burn, but we never stop. The aliens thought they had crushed us, but now, in their own skies, in their own stronghold, we had left a scar they would never forget. And even if I died here, drifting among the ashes, I knew one thing with certainty. Humanity's vengeance had only just begun.